Listen carefully. The rain fell softly over Rome. Merchants hurried through the streets, pulling cloaks tighter around their shoulders. Wheels splashed through puddles. Vendors shouted prices from beneath canvas coverings. Life continued as it always had. Yet for one man everything had changed. His name was Lucius. Only 3 days earlier, he had been one of the most respected grain traders in the city. His warehouses had been full. His ledgers had shown profit after profit. Friends sought his advice. Rivals envied his success. Then came the fire. No warning, no mercy. A single spark from a neighboring storage building had become a raging inferno. Within hours, years of labor had turned into smoke. His warehouses burned. His grain reserves vanished. His contracts collapsed. His investors withdrew support. By dawn, the wealth he had spent 20 years building had become ashes scattered by the wind. Now he sat alone beneath the shelter of a stone archway. His clothes were wet. His eyes were hollow. His hands trembled, not from cold, from fear. The future that had once seemed secure now appeared as a dark and endless void. What would happen tomorrow? How would he repay debts? How would he provide for his family? How long before creditors arrived? How long before everyone knew? His mind raced with questions. Every answer seemed worse than the last. A familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. "You are suffering twice." Lucius looked up. An old man stood nearby. His beard was white. His posture was straight despite his age. His expression carried the calm certainty of someone untouched by storms. The old man lowered himself onto the stone bench beside him. "What do you mean?" Lucius asked. The old man pointed toward the rain. "Can you stop that storm? No. Can you reverse the fire? No. Can you bring back the grain? No." The old man nodded. "Then why are you fighting reality?" Lucius clenched his jaw. "You speak as though I have lost nothing." "I did not say that." "Then what are you saying?" The old man folded his hands. "You have suffered a loss, yes, but now you are creating a second loss." Lucius frowned. The old man continued. "The first loss was your warehouses. The second loss is your peace of mind. The fire took the first. You are surrendering the second." Lucius stared silently at the rain. The words irritated him, partly because they sounded impossible, mostly because they sounded true. The old man continued. "Tell me, how many times have you relived the fire since it happened?" Lucius looked away. "Hundreds, perhaps thousands. Every waking hour, every moment." He replayed it endlessly. What if he had inspected the warehouse earlier? What if he had hired more guards? What if he had chosen a different location? What if? What if? What if? The old man seemed to read his thoughts. "You keep returning to a door that only opens into yesterday." Lucius remained silent. "You hope that if you visit it enough times, the past will change. It will not." The rain intensified. Water flowed along the streets like silver rivers. The old man continued. "Marcus Aurelius once wrote that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Lucius recognized the name. The emperor, the philosopher, the Stoic, the ruler who governed an empire while enduring plague, war, betrayal, and personal tragedy. The old man pointed toward Lucius's chest. "Your financial loss exists, but much of your suffering comes from stories your mind is creating." "What stories?" The old man smiled slightly. "My life is ruined. I will never recover. Everyone will abandon me. The future is hopeless. I am finished." Lucius felt a chill. Those were the exact thoughts he had been repeating. The old man nodded. "You see, the fire destroyed buildings. Your imagination is trying to destroy your soul." For a long moment, neither spoke. Thunder echoed across the distant hills. Then Lucius asked the question that had been consuming him. What if those fears are true? The old man looked toward the grey sky. Then you will face them. The answer surprised him. No comforting promise, no false optimism, no guarantee everything would work out, just reality. The old man continued. Stoicism does not teach that bad things won't happen. It teaches that bad things cannot destroy your character unless you permit them. Lucius listened carefully. Money can disappear. Property can vanish. Markets can collapse. Fortunes can evaporate. But courage remains available. Wisdom remains available. Discipline remains available. Justice remains available. The most important assets are still in your possession. Lucius looked down at his empty hands. They certainly did not feel valuable, the old man noticed. You think wealth made you strong. He shook his head. Wealth merely revealed strength that already existed. Lucius frowned. The old man continued. Who built the business? I did. Who worked before sunrise? I did. Who negotiated contracts? I did. Who solved problems? I did. The old man smiled. Then the warehouses were not the source of your ability. You were. For the first time since the disaster, Lucius felt something unexpected. Not confidence, not relief. Something smaller, a tiny spark. The possibility that perhaps the fire had not destroyed everything. The old man rose to his feet. Where are you going? Lucius asked. Home. That's all? The old man laughed softly. What more is needed? You lost your fortune. Now begins the more important task. What task? The old man's eyes hardened, learning whether your peace depends upon money. He turned to leave, then stopped. One final sentence drifted through the rain. Most men spend their lives believing they own their wealth. They discover during hardship that their wealth owned them. And with that he disappeared into the crowd. Lucius sat alone. The rain continued falling. The city continued moving. The world had not stopped because his fortune had vanished. For the first time since the fire, he stopped replaying the disaster. Instead, he asked a different question. Not, why did this happen to me, but what kind of man will I become because it happened? And that question would begin a journey that would change everything. Yet Lucius did not know that the hardest test was still ahead, because the following morning a messenger would arrive, carrying news far worse than the fire itself. The next morning arrived without mercy. Lucius had slept little. The words of the old man echoed through his mind throughout the night. The fire took your warehouses. Do not let it take your peace. Simple words, yet every time he repeated them, another voice rose to challenge them. A louder voice. A darker voice. A voice that sounded remarkably like his own. Easy for philosophers to say. They don't know what you've lost. They don't know what's coming. When dawn finally broke over Rome, Lucius stood at the window of his modest villa, staring toward the distant smoke that still drifted from the ruins of his business. The sight struck him like a spear. The blackened remains looked less like destroyed buildings and more like a graveyard of plans, a graveyard of ambitions, a graveyard of certainty. Then came the knock. 3 sharp strikes against the front door. Lucius felt his stomach tighten. He already knew. Bad news rarely arrived quietly. A servant opened the door. Moments later, a messenger entered. His face was pale. His expression carried the uncomfortable look of a man forced to deliver pain. Lucius motioned for him to speak. The messenger hesitated, then finally said, "Several investors have withdrawn their support." Lucius nodded. He expected that. The messenger continued. 3 creditors demand immediate repayment. Again expected. Then came the final blow. The Senate has approved grain imports from Egypt at reduced tariffs. Silence filled the room. Lucius felt the blood drain from his face. The announcement meant disaster. Even if he somehow rebuilt his warehouses, cheaper grain would flood the market. Prices would collapse. Margins would vanish. Competitors with greater reserves would survive. Smaller traders would be crushed. Men like him. The messenger lowered his eyes. "I am sorry." Lucius said nothing. The room seemed smaller, the air heavier, the future darker. When the messenger finally departed, Lucius remained standing motionless. His thoughts exploded. One fear became 10. 10 became 100. 100 became an avalanche. Everything is over. You will never recover. Your family will suffer. People will mock you. You have failed. You have wasted 20 years. You are ruined. The words attacked relentlessly, hour after hour, until finally he found himself wandering through the streets without direction. The city bustled around him. Children laughed. Merchants traded. Soldiers marched. Life continued. Yet Lucius felt as though he existed behind a wall invisible to everyone else. Then he saw him, the old man, seated beside a public fountain, watching water flow from a carved stone lion. The old philosopher noticed Lucius immediately. "You look worse." Lucius laughed bitterly. "Worse news arrived?" "Of course it did." The answer surprised him. "Of course?" The old man nodded. "Hardship rarely travels alone." Lucius dropped onto the bench beside him. "I have lost everything." "No, yes, no." The old man pointed toward the fountain. Water flowed steadily into a stone basin. "What do you see?" "A fountain." "What else?" Lucius sighed. "Water." The old man shook his head. "I see a lesson." Lucius almost groaned. Everything seemed to become a lesson with this man. The philosopher continued. "The water flows. It follows its nature. It does not complain. It does not resist. When a stone blocks its path, it finds another route. When a wall stands before it, it moves around it. When gravity pulls it downward, it obeys." The old man looked directly into Lucius's eyes. "You are fighting reality." "I am trying to survive." "No," the philosopher's voice sharpened. "You are arguing with facts." Lucius clenched his fists. "What should I do?" "Celebrate. Smile. Pretend nothing happened." The old man remained calm. "No. Accept." The word irritated Lucius immediately. Accept, such a small word. Such a difficult act. The philosopher continued. Acceptance does not mean approval. It means recognizing reality exactly as it is. You cannot solve a problem you refuse to acknowledge. Lucius looked away. The old man pointed toward him. "Tell me the truth." "What truth? What are you actually afraid of?" Lucius opened his mouth, then stopped. For several moments he said nothing. Finally he spoke. "Not about money, not about debt, not about markets, but the fear buried beneath them all. I am afraid I am nobody without my success." The old man smiled. At last the real wound had revealed itself. "Now we are discussing the correct problem." Lucius stared at him. The philosopher continued. "Most men think they fear poverty. They do not. They fear losing the identity built around wealth." Lucius listened carefully. "When your business flourished, who were you? A successful trader. And now?" Lucius hesitated. "I don't know." The old man nodded. "Exactly. The crisis is not financial. It is philosophical." Lucius frowned. The old man continued. "For years, you attached your value to external things. Profit, status, recognition, comfort. Now those things are being removed, and you are discovering whether anything remains." The words landed heavily, because they felt true, painfully true. The philosopher stood and began walking. Lucius followed. They moved through the crowded streets of Rome, past shops, past temples, past senators carried in ornate litters, past beggars sitting beside marble columns. Eventually they arrived at a hill overlooking the city. The old man pointed downward. "What do you see?"
"Look," Closer.
Lucius scanned the streets below. Thousands of lives moved simultaneously. Thousands of struggles, thousands of victories, thousands of failures. The philosopher spoke quietly. Every person below is carrying a burden. The wealthy fear losing wealth. The poor fear remaining poor. The powerful fear losing power. The loved fear abandonment. The healthy fear illness. The living fear death. Lucius remained silent. The philosopher continued. You are not being singled out by fate. You are participating in the human condition. The wind swept across the hill. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then the old philosopher asked a question. If all your wealth returned tomorrow, would you finally be at peace? Lucius answered immediately, yes. The old man laughed. No. Lucius frowned. No? No. The philosopher pointed toward the city. If wealth created peace, every rich man would sleep soundly. They do not. If money removed fear, wealthy men would never worry. They do. If possessions created security, emperors would never feel anxiety. They do. The old man looked toward the horizon. External things can provide comfort. They cannot provide tranquility. That must come from within. Lucius thought about the countless nights he had spent worrying even when his business thrived. Worrying about competitors, worrying about market changes, worrying about losses that never came. The philosopher was right. His anxiety had existed long before the fire. The disaster had simply exposed it. The old man smiled slightly. You believe your suffering began when you lost money. It began when you believed money could protect you from uncertainty. The words struck like lightning, because uncertainty had always been there. The fire merely removed the illusion of control. For the first time, Lucius understood something profound. The market had never been certain. His future had never been guaranteed. His wealth had never been permanent. He had simply convinced himself otherwise, and that illusion had become a prison. The philosopher turned toward him. Now the prison door is opening. Lucius looked confused. This feels like freedom to you? No, the old man smiled. Freedom rarely feels comfortable at first. As the sun began setting over Rome, Lucius stood overlooking the city. His problems remained. His debts remained. His losses remained. Nothing external had changed, yet something internal had begun shifting. The panic that had consumed him for days no longer felt quite as powerful. Not gone, but weakened, like a storm slowly losing strength. However, fate was preparing another lesson. One that would test everything he had learned so far. Because 3 days later, Lucius would receive an offer so tempting that it threatened to destroy his character far more completely than financial ruin ever could. 3 days passed. For the first time since the fire, Lucius felt a measure of control returning to his mind. Not over his circumstances, not over his finances, not over the future, only over himself. And according to the teachings of the Stoics, that was the only control that truly mattered. Still, peace remained fragile. Every morning brought fresh reminders of his situation. Creditors sent messages. Former business associates avoided him. Rumors spread through Rome's marketplaces faster than wildfire. The successful grain merchant, who once commanded respect, was becoming a cautionary tale. Lucius could feel it. People looked at him differently now, some with pity, some with curiosity, some with hidden satisfaction. Failure always attracted spectators, especially when the fallen man had once stood high. Yet, despite everything, he continued remembering the words of the old philosopher. Do not add suffering to, do not fight reality. Your character remains your greatest possession. Those lessons became anchors during difficult moments. Then temptation arrived. It came wearing expensive robes and carrying a smile. The man's name was Cassian, one of Rome's wealthiest merchants, a man known for achieving success under any circumstances, at any cost. When Cassian entered Lucius's villa, he looked around with polite interest, the expression of a man inspecting property before deciding whether it was worth purchasing. After exchanging formal greetings, Cassian got straight to the point. "I hear you've fallen on difficult times." Lucius forced a smile. "The entire city seems to hear." Cassian chuckled. "News travels quickly." Then he leaned forward. "I may have a solution." The words immediately caught Lucius's attention. A solution? How long had he been waiting to hear those words? Cassian continued. "I have access to a shipment of Egyptian grain." Lucius listened carefully. "Large quantities, very large quantities, enough to restore your position." The offer sounded almost miraculous, too miraculous. The old philosopher's warnings echoed faintly in the back of his mind. But desperation has a way of silencing wisdom. "What do you want in return?" Lucius asked. Cassian smiled. The smile of a man who had been waiting for that question. "Nothing unreasonable." Lucius remained silent. Cassian lowered his voice. "The grain entered Rome through unofficial channels." There it was, the hidden hook. Smuggling, illegal imports, tax avoidance, fraud. The details hardly mattered. The meaning was clear. Cassian wanted a respectable merchant to help legitimize questionable goods. In return, Lucius would receive enormous profits. Enough to rebuild everything, enough to erase his debts, enough to restore his reputation, enough to make the nightmare disappear, or so it seemed. Cassian watched him carefully, like a fisherman observing a struggling fish. "You need time," Cassian said. Lucius nodded. Cassian stood. Before leaving, he offered one final temptation. "Think carefully. Rome respects winners. No one remembers how they achieved success." Then he departed, leaving silence behind, and a decision, a terrible decision. That night, Lucius barely slept. His mind became a battlefield. One side presented endless arguments. "Take the deal. You need the money. Your family depends on you. No one will know. Everyone bends the rules. This is survival." The other side spoke more quietly, but it spoke with greater weight. What kind of man will you become? What will success cost? What are you truly trying to save? His thoughts raged until dawn. By morning he could no longer endure them. He needed guidance, so he sought out the old philosopher. He found him sitting beneath an olive tree outside the city walls. The old man appeared unsurprised, as expected. Lucius frowned. "What is? You have come carrying temptation." Lucius stared. "How did you know?" The philosopher smiled. "Because hardship always tests character. Sometimes through pain, sometimes through opportunity." Lucius sat beside him, then explained everything. The offer, the money, the risks, the rewards. When he finished, the old philosopher remained silent for several moments. Finally he asked, "What do you want me to tell you?" Lucius blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean you already know the answer." Lucius looked away. The philosopher nodded. "Exactly." The answer was already there, hidden beneath layers of fear and desire. The old man continued. "When a man seeks advice, he often hopes someone will permit what he already wishes to do." Lucius felt exposed, because part of him wanted permission. Permission to compromise. Permission to justify. Permission to choose profit over principle. The philosopher picked up a small olive from the ground. "What is this?" "An olive. And if I plant it?" "An olive tree." The philosopher nodded. "Every action contains a seed." He held up the olive. "The question is never what you gain today. The question is what grows tomorrow." Lucius listened carefully. If you plant dishonesty, what grows? More dishonesty. If you plant greed, more greed. If you plant cowardice, more cowardice. The philosopher tossed the olive aside. Character works the same way. Every decision trains the soul. The words settled heavily. Lucius realized he had been focused entirely on outcomes. Money, debt, recovery. He had ignored a more important consideration. The kind of person he was becoming. The old man looked directly at him. Tell me, if the entire city vanished tomorrow, if no one could praise you, if no one could judge you, if no one would ever know what choice you made, what would you do? Lucius opened his mouth, then stopped. The answer appeared immediately, clear, undeniable, painful. He would reject the offer, not because of laws, not because of reputation, not because of fear of punishment, because it was wrong, and he knew it. The philosopher smiled. There is your answer. Lucius sighed. But I need the money, of course. But need does not transform vice into virtue. The old man rose slowly to his feet, then pointed toward a distant mountain. Look there. Lucius followed his gaze. The mountain stood unmoved beneath the sky. Wind struck it, rain struck it, storms struck it, yet it remained. The philosopher spoke quietly. Marcus Aurelius taught that the mind can become like a fortress, a place no external event can conquer. Lucius nodded. The philosopher's eyes sharpened. Most people misunderstand. They think the greatest threat comes from outside. It does not. He pointed toward Lucius's chest. The greatest threat comes from within. Fear, greed, desperation, resentment, self-pity. Those are the armies that attack the fortress. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the philosopher asked, what is the value of rebuilding your fortune if you destroy yourself in the process? Lucius had no answer, because there wasn't one. As evening approached, he returned home. The decision had been made. The following morning, he sent word to Cassian. The answer was no, no partnership, no deal, no compromise, no shortcut. The response arrived within hours. A single sentence. Then enjoy your poverty. Lucius read the message twice, then set it aside. To his surprise, he smiled. Not because his problems were solved. They were not. Not because his future was secure, it wasn't. But because for the first time since the fire, he had chosen principle over panic. And that victory felt strangely valuable. More valuable than money. More valuable than approval. More valuable than comfort. Yet he did not realize that his greatest emotional battle still lay ahead. Because while financial loss had tested his courage, and temptation had tested his integrity, the next challenge would test something far more difficult. His ability to remain calm when betrayal came from someone he trusted completely. And when that betrayal arrived, even the teachings of Marcus Aurelius would seem almost impossible to follow. A week after rejecting Cassian's offer, Lucius began to notice something strange. The fear that had once consumed every waking moment no longer ruled him. His financial situation had not improved. His debts still existed. His warehouses remained ashes. His future remained uncertain. Yet the constant storm inside his mind had begun to quiet. For the first time, he understood something Marcus Aurelius had spent his life teaching. Peace is not the absence of problems. Peace is the ability to remain steady while facing them. Still, fate had one final lesson prepared, and it would arrive from the last place Lucius expected. One afternoon, a creditor appeared unexpectedly. His expression was severe, his tone formal.
I have come regarding your remaining accounts.
Lucius nodded. I understand. The creditor hesitated, then produced several documents. Before proceeding, there is something you should know. Lucius frowned. The man handed him the papers. As he read them, confusion turned into disbelief. Then disbelief turned into shock. The signatures belonged to Marcus, his former business partner, his closest friend for nearly 15 years. The man he trusted more than anyone. According to the documents, Marcus had secretly withdrawn substantial funds from their partnership months before the fire. He had transferred assets into private accounts, protected his own interests, prepared for disaster, and never told Lucius. The room became silent. Lucius read the papers again and again, each time hoping they would somehow change. They did not. The evidence was undeniable. Marcus had betrayed him, not during the crisis, before it, while smiling at him, while sharing meals with him, while calling him brother. The pain hit harder than the fire, harder than the debts, harder than the loss of wealth, because money lost through misfortune wounds the wallet. Trust lost through betrayal wounds the soul. That evening, Lucius walked alone beyond the city walls. His emotions surged violently. Anger, resentment, humiliation, bitterness. 100 imagined confrontations filled his mind. He imagined shouting, accusing, exposing, punishing, making Marcus suffer. Each fantasy brought temporary satisfaction, then left him feeling worse. The old philosopher found him there after sunset, as though he had expected this moment. "You have discovered something painful." Lucius laughed bitterly. "Painful?" He handed over the documents. The old man read them carefully, then returned them, his expression unchanged. Lucius stared. "That's all? What did you expect?" "Shock, outrage, something." The philosopher shook his head. "I expected betrayal." Lucius blinked. "What?" The old man sat upon a stone. "Not from him specifically, from life." Lucius frowned. The philosopher continued. "People will disappoint you. Some will lie. Some will abandon you. Some will betray you. Not because fate targets you, but because human beings are imperfect." Lucius felt anger rising. "So I should simply accept it?" "No." The old man looked directly at him. "You should understand it. There is a difference." The wind moved through the trees. The philosopher continued. "Tell me, what hurts most?" Lucius shook his head. "No, the betrayal." The old man nodded. As expected. For several moments he remained silent, then asked, "What power does Marcus have over you right now?" Lucius immediately answered, "Nah." The philosopher raised an eyebrow. "Then why is he controlling your emotions?" The question landed like a hammer. Lucius opened his mouth. No words came. The old man continued. "The betrayal happened. That is a fact. The anger you repeatedly feed afterward. That is a choice." Lucius looked away. The philosopher's voice softened. "Marcus has already taken enough. Why continue handing him your peace?" The words struck deeply, because for days he had been doing exactly that. Every angry thought, every imagined argument, every moment of bitterness, each one strengthened the injury. The betrayal had occurred once. His mind was replaying it 1,000 times. The old philosopher stood, then pointed toward the horizon. The sun was setting, brilliant gold fading into darkness. "Look." Lucius watched silently. The philosopher asked, "Can you stop the sun from setting?" "No." "Can you command the seasons?" "No." "Can you change yesterday?" "No." The old man smiled. "Then why demand impossible powers over the actions of others?" Lucius remained silent. For the first time, he understood. His suffering came not from reality itself, but from insisting reality should have been different. Marcus should not have betrayed me. The fire should not have happened. The market should not have changed. Life should be fair.
Yet none of those demands altered a single fact. Reality remained untouched. Only his peace suffered. The philosopher continued.
Marcus Aurelius wrote something remarkable. He said that when you wake each morning, expect to encounter difficult people. Not because humanity is evil, but because humanity is human. The old man folded his hands. When you expect perfection from imperfect people, disappointment becomes inevitable. When you understand human weakness, disappointment loses much of its power. For a long time they stood together in silence, watching daylight fade. Then Lucius asked the question that had haunted him since the fire. What if I lose everything? The philosopher smiled, a genuine smile. The smile of a teacher who knows the student is finally ready for the answer. You already did. The words surprised him. The old man continued. You lost your wealth. You lost your certainty. You lost your status. You lost trusted relationships. You lost the future you imagined. He paused, then added, and yet here you stand. The realization hit with extraordinary force. He was still standing, breathing, thinking, learning, growing. The catastrophe he feared would destroy him had not destroyed him. It had revealed him. The philosopher's final words came quietly. The obstacle was never your enemy. It was your teacher. The fire taught you impermanence. The debts taught you resilience. The temptation taught you integrity. The betrayal taught you wisdom. Every hardship gave you something wealth never could. Lucius looked toward Rome in the distance. The city lights flickered beneath the darkening sky. For the first time in many months, he felt something stronger than hope, understanding. He finally saw what Marcus Aurelius had spent his life trying to explain. Financial security is fragile. Reputation is fragile. Success is fragile. Everything external can disappear, but character remains. And a person who learns to govern their own mind possesses something no market crash, no loss, no betrayal, and no misfortune can ever take away. Years later, Lucius would rebuild part of his business. Not all of it, but enough. He would live comfortably, not extravagantly, but comfortably. Yet when people asked how he survived the worst financial collapse of his life, he rarely spoke about money. Instead, he spoke about a lesson learned during the darkest chapter of his journey. That true wealth is not found in what you own. It is found in what remains when everything you own is gone. And that is why the Stoics taught that mastering your emotions during uncertainty is not about controlling the world. It is about controlling your response to the world. Because loss is inevitable. Uncertainty is inevitable. Change is inevitable. But suffering beyond the event itself is often optional. The person who understands this discovers a freedom greater than wealth, a security greater than possessions, and a peace that survives even the harshest storms.